A man found dead on a remote Brazilian hill wore a lead-eye mask and carried a note about ingesting capsules for a meeting with the supernatural. Another man, fearing them, scribbled YOGTZEs before being found dying in his crashed car. Though he wasn't killed by the crash, a woman's body discovered in Norway with 9 different passports had all identifying labels meticulously cut from her clothes and belongings. For decades, a high-status prisoner in France was forced to wear a mask. His true identity, a closely guarded secret known perhaps only to the king. These are just a few of history's most puzzling, unidentified people, individuals whose stories are composed entirely of questions. Number 12. The man who uttered YOGTZEs and died mysteriously. On the night of October 25, 1984, in Anshausen, West Germany, a paranoid food engineer named Günther Stoll told his wife he suddenly understood something. He exclaimed, "Jet geht, mir ein Licht auf," meaning, "Now I get it," or "Now I see the light." He then quickly wrote down 6 letters on a piece of paper. YOGTZE. He immediately crossed them out. Shortly before 11 p.m., he left his house. He went to his favorite pub in Wilnsdorf and ordered a beer. "Witnesses," said he. Then suddenly fell to the floor, hitting his face. He seemed to have lost consciousness briefly. Pub patrons said he had not been drinking before this incident and did not appear to be under the influence of alcohol. After this, Stoll left the pub. Around 1 a.m. on October 26, he drove to Hagerseelbach, a village where he had lived as a child. He went to the house of an elderly woman he knew from his childhood and rang her doorbell. He reportedly told her in a distressed state, "Tonight, there will be a rather terrible incident." He also mentioned those men, or the boys, who were going to harm him. The woman, alarmed by his state, advised him to go home to his wife, but he left without further explanation. 2 hours later, around 3 a.m., 2 truck drivers discovered Günther Stoll's Volkswagen Golf crashed into a barrier on the A45 motorway near Hagen Sud. Car was wrecked. Inside, they found Günther Stoll, naked and severely injured, but alive. He was barely conscious. Before losing consciousness completely, he managed to tell the truck drivers that 4 other men had been in the car with him. He claimed they were not his friends, and that they had beaten him and then run away. He died in the ambulance, on the way to the hospital. The investigation revealed several baffling details. Medical examiners determined that Stoll's injuries were not consistent with the car crash alone. He had been injured before the crash took place. Furthermore, it was established that he was not driving the car when it crashed. He was likely in the passenger seat or the back. He was also naked at the time he was found, which was unexplained. The location where he sustained his fatal injuries was also determined to be different from the crash site. Police believed he was injured elsewhere, then placed in his car, which was then driven to the A45 and crashed. Who were the 4 men Stoll mentioned? Where did they go? What did YOGTZE, or perhaps the similar-sounding word YOGTZEs, often reported as the actual spelling on the note, as Yo is uncommon in German as an initial letter unless for loanwords, mean? Was it a code, an acronym, or something else entirely? Despite extensive investigations, the case of Günther Stoll and the meaning of YOGTZEs remain completely unsolved. Number 11. The Lead Masks Case of Vintum Hill. On August 20th, 1966, a young man flying a kite on Vintum Hill in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, stumbled upon a disturbing scene. He found the bodies of 2 men lying side by side in a clearing, partially covered by grass. Police were called to the remote location. The two deceased men were later identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, both electronics technicians from Campos dos Goytacazes, a town several hours away. They were dressed in neat suits and waterproof coats. Next to their bodies, investigators found a small handwritten notebook. Inside was a cryptic note. 1630 be at the agreed place. 1830 ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals, await mask signal. Perhaps the strangest items found at the scene were the lead eye masks. Each man was wearing a crudely made mask, similar to what one might wear for radiation protection, but made of lead and seemingly cut from a sheet of the metal. There were no signs of violence on the bodies or in the immediate vicinity. No weapons were found. Alongside the bodies and the notebook, police also recovered an empty water bottle and a handkerchief. Toxicology reports were conducted, but due to the condition of the internal organs and the limitations of forensic science at the time, no definitive traces of poison or drugs were found. However, the reference to capsules in the note strongly suggested they had taken something. Friends and family of Manoel and Miguel reported that the two men were interested in spiritualism and ufology. They had apparently told acquaintances they were going to Sao Paulo to buy electronic components for their work, and also some material for a secret experiment. They left Campos dos Goytacazes on August 17th, telling family they would return soon. They were seen at a bar in Niterói on the 17th, where Miguel seemed nervous and kept checking his watch. The barman recalled them buying a bottle of water, possibly the one found at the scene. What happened between their arrival in Niterói and their deaths remains unknown. What was the agreed place? What effect were they expecting from the capsules? What did protect metals mean? And what was the mask signal they were awaiting? The lead masks themselves are a profound mystery. Were they intended for protection from something? Perhaps something they expected to witness as part of their experiment. The Vinton Hill lead masks case has generated numerous theories, from accidental drug overdose during a pseudo-scientific experiment to a meeting with extraterrestrials gone wrong, or even murder. Decades later, the deaths of Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana remain an official unsolved mystery in Brazil. Number 10. The Babushka Lady of the JFK assassination. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The event was captured on film and in photographs by numerous bystanders. Among them, one figure stands out for her persistent anonymity: the Babushka Lady. She earned this nickname because she was wearing a headscarf similar to those worn by elderly Russian women, babushkas, along with a tan or light brown coat. She is visible in several films and photographs of the assassination, including the famous Zapruder film. What makes her particularly intriguing is her position and her actions. She was standing on the grass between Elm Street and Main Street, relatively close to the presidential limousine as it passed. Crucially, she appears to be holding a camera to her face, seemingly filming or photographing the motorcade at the precise moments of the shots. In the chaotic aftermath of the assassination, as most people took cover or fled, the Babushka Lady can be seen remaining calm, still standing, and apparently continuing to film. Some footage shows her crossing Elm Street towards the grassy knoll area after the shooting. Despite extensive efforts by the FBI and independent researchers to identify her and locate her film, she has never been definitively identified. Her film, if it exists and captured the events, could be a crucial piece of evidence, potentially offering a unique perspective on the assassination. The House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s also tried to locate her, without success. Over the years, several women have come forward claiming to be the Babushka Lady, but none have been conclusively verified. One notable claimant was Beverly Oliver, who in 1970 asserted she was the woman and that her undeveloped film was confiscated by men identifying themselves as FBI agents. However, her claims have been met with considerable skepticism. For instance, the camera model she claimed to have used was not manufactured until years after the assassination. The mystery of the Babushka Lady is not just about her identity, but also about what she might have recorded. In an event scrutinized more than almost any other in history, the footage from her camera remains one of the great missing pieces. Her composure during the event and her subsequent disappearance into anonymity have fueled countless discussions and speculations for decades. Who was she, and what did her camera capture that day in Daley Plaza? The answers remain elusive. Number 9. Tank Man, the lone protester of Tiananmen Square. On June 5, 1989, one day after the Chinese government's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square, Beijing, an unknown man performed an extraordinary act of defiance. As a column of Type 59 tanks rumbled down Chang'an Avenue, this solitary figure, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, carrying 2 shopping bags, walked into the middle of the road and stood directly in the path of the lead tank. Tank driver attempted to maneuver around him, but the man repeatedly shifted his position to block its path. This tense standoff continued for several minutes. At one point, the man climbed onto the hull of the lead tank and appeared to speak with a crew member through a driver's port. After climbing down, the tank again tried to move forward, but the man once more placed himself in its way. This incredible scene was witnessed and photographed by several journalists from nearby hotel balconies. The most famous images were taken by Jeff Widener of the Associated Press, Stuart Franklin of Magnum Photos, and Charlie Cole of Newsweek. Video footage also captured the event. Eventually, the man was pulled away from the tanks by 2 figures in blue, presumed to be concerned onlookers or possibly plainclothes security, and he disappeared into the crowd. His identity and his ultimate fate remain unknown. The Chinese government has never publicly acknowledged the incident or provided any information about the man. He became an international symbol of peaceful protest and resistance against overwhelming state power. His actions broadcast around the world provided a powerful image of an individual standing up to authoritarianism. Despite the global impact of his image, who Tank Man was, is a complete mystery. Was he a student, a worker, or just an ordinary citizen moved to act? What happened to him after he was pulled away? Was he arrested? Did he go into hiding? Or did he simply melt back into the vast population of Beijing? There have been various unconfirmed reports and speculations over the years regarding his identity and what became of him, but nothing concrete has ever emerged. The Chinese authorities have suppressed discussion of the 1989 protests, and information about Tank Man is heavily censored within China. He remains an anonymous hero, his image a lasting testament to courage in the face of immense power, his personal story lost to history. Number 8. The enigmatic woman of the Seine, l'inconnue de la Seine. In the late 1880s, or possibly earlier, the body of a young woman was reportedly pulled from the River Seine in Paris, France. As was customary at the time for unidentified bodies, she was taken to the Paris morgue and her face was cast in plaster to create a death mask. This was done in the hope that someone might recognize and identify her. According to the story, the pathologist on duty was so captivated by her serene expression and faint, enigmatic smile that he felt compelled to preserve her features. The cause of her death was unknown, but it was widely assumed to be suicide by drowning, as her body showed no signs of violence. She was estimated to be no older than 16. Her identity was never established, and she became known as l'inconnue de la Seine, the unknown woman of the Seine. Copies of her death mask soon became a fashionable, if morbid, fixture in Parisian bohemian society. Artists, writers, and poets were fascinated by her beauty and the mystery of her smile, often compared to that of the Mona Lisa. Albert Camus and other authors and poets wrote about her. Her likeness was reproduced countless times, adorning the walls of artists' studios across Europe. The story of the unknown girl and her peaceful expression in death captured the romantic imagination of the era. Decades later, Lencaunu's face took on an entirely new and life-saving role. In the 1950s, Asmund Lerdahl, a Norwegian toy manufacturer, was tasked with creating a training aid for the newly developed technique of mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or CPR. Lerdahl wanted his mannequin to have a natural and non-threatening appearance. He recalled seeing a mask of Lencaunu on the wall of his parents-in-law's house. He decided that her tranquil features would be perfect. Thus, the face of Lencaunu de la Seine became the face of Rizusi Anne, one of the first and most widely used CPR training mannequins. Millions of people around the world have learned life-saving techniques by practicing on a mannequin bearing her likeness. It is often said that she has the most kissed face of all time. Despite her posthumous fame, the true identity of the young woman who drowned in the Seine, her life story, and the circumstances of her death remain a complete mystery. Her peaceful, smiling death mask continues to intrigue and inspire. Number 7. The Boy in the Box, America's Unknown Child. On February 25, 1957, in a wooded area off Susquehanna Road in Fox Chase, Philadelphia, a young college student checking his muskrat traps discovered a large cardboard box. Inside, wrapped in a plaid blanket, was the naked, bruised body of a young boy. He was estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes. He was malnourished, and his body showed signs of severe physical abuse, both recent and past. He had several surgical scars, including one on his ankle and groin, and an L-shaped scar under his chin. His hair appeared to have been recently and crudely cut, as clumps of his hair were found on his body. Philadelphia police launched an intensive investigation. The boy's photograph and fingerprints were circulated widely. Flyers were posted in police stations, post offices, and liquor stores across Pennsylvania and neighboring states. Investigators meticulously checked local records for missing children and interviewed hundreds of people. The JCPenney box he was found in was traced to a specific batch sold in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, but this lead did not identify the purchaser. The blanket he was wrapped in was also common. Despite the immense publicity and the efforts of law enforcement, no one came forward to identify him. He became known as America's Unknown Child, or the Boy in the Box. Over the decades, numerous theories and leads emerged, but none led to a definitive identification or the arrest of a perpetrator. One prominent theory involved a nearby foster home, but it could not be substantiated. Another involved a woman known as Man, who claimed her abusive mother had bought the boy, subjected him to terrible abuse, and then killed him, with M, then a child, present when her mother disposed of the body with a man. While compelling parts of her story were inconsistent, the boy was buried in a potter's field. In 1998, his body was exhumed for DNA testing. DNA was extracted from a tooth, but it did not match any existing database at the time and did not lead to an identification. He was reburied in Ivy Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia, which purchased a plot for him. His gravestone reads, "America's Unknown Child. Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." In late 2022, after more than 65 years, Philadelphia police announced a major breakthrough. Using modern DNA analysis and forensic genetic genealogy, they had finally identified the boy in the box. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born January 13th, 1953. Investigators were able to identify his birth mother and obtained his birth certificate. They also identified his biological father. Both parents are deceased. Authorities stated that they have suspicions about who was responsible for his death, but no charges have been filed, partly due to the passage of time and the death of potential suspects. While his name is now known, the full circumstances of his tragic life and death, and who was ultimately responsible for the abuse and his murder, largely remain an agonizing mystery. The investigation is considered ongoing. Number 6. Caspar Hauser, the Enigma of Nuremberg. On Whit Monday, May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in the Unschlittplatz Square of Nuremberg, Germany. He was disoriented and had difficulty walking. He carried a letter addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment. The letter, purportedly written by an anonymous poor laborer, stated that the boy had been left in his custody as an infant in 1812, and that he had kept him in confinement, teaching him to read, write, and understand Christianity, but never letting him take a single step out of my house. The letter asked the captain to either take him in or hang him. Another short letter, supposedly from his mother to the laborer, said the boy's name was Caspar. He was born on April 30th, 1812, and his father, a cavalryman of the 6th Regiment, was dead. Caspar himself could say little, reportedly only a few phrases like "want to be a rider, like my father was," and "horse." He seemed to have the mental capacity of a young child and was fascinated by simple objects like toys. He showed an aversion to most food and drink, consuming only bread and water. He claimed, once he learned to communicate better, that he had spent his entire life in a small, dark cell, about 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1.5 meters high, sleeping on straw and playing with 2 wooden toy horses. He said he was fed only bread and water by an unknown man, who never revealed his face. Shortly before his release, this man supposedly taught him to write his name and a few phrases, and then led him out of the cell and abandoned him near Nuremberg. Caspar Hauser became a huge public sensation. He was cared for by various townspeople and educators, including the philosopher Georg Friedrich Daumer, who taught him and observed his unusual development and sensory acuteness. Theories about his origin abounded. Some believed he was a fraud, an impostor, seeking fame and fortune. Others speculated he might be of noble, possibly even princely lineage, perhaps a prince of Baden, hidden away due to dynastic intrigue. This theory suggested he was the hereditary Prince of Baden, supposedly switched at birth with a dying infant in 1812 to allow a child from a morganatic marriage to inherit. Caspar's life continued to be marked by strange incidents. In October 1829, he was found with a bleeding wound on his forehead, claiming he had been attacked in Daumer's cellar by a hooded man who threatened him. In April 1830, a pistol shot went off in his room. He claimed he accidentally discharged it. In December 1833, Caspar suffered a fatal stab wound. He said he had been lured to the Ansbach court garden with the promise of information about his origins. There, he claimed, a stranger stabbed him in the chest and gave him a purse. Caspar managed to walk home but died of his injuries 3 days later, on December 17, 1833. The purse found contained a note written in mirror writing with cryptic references. The circumstances of his death, like his life, were ambiguous. Was it murder by his supposed enemies, or a self-inflicted wound designed to reignite interest in his story, which then went tragically wrong? An analysis in more recent times on bloodstains, purported to be Kaspar's, has yielded conflicting results regarding the Baden Prince theory. Kaspar Hauser remains one of history's most profound and debated enigmas. Number 5. The Isdal Woman, a Cold War Spy. Mystery. On November 29, 1970, a university professor and his 2 young daughters were hiking in the remote Isdalen Valley near Bergen, Norway, an area known locally as Death Valley due to its harsh terrain and a history of suicides in the Middle Ages. They came across the partially burned body of a naked woman wedged between some rocks in an unfrequented spot. The scene was disturbing. The front of her body and her clothes were severely charred. Near the body, investigators found a collection of items: an empty bottle of St. Halvard liqueur, 2 plastic water bottles, a packed lunch, a silver spoon, remnants of a fur-lined hat, and a broken umbrella. Most significantly, police discovered 12 pink sleeping pills, Fenimal brand, and a further scattering of pills. All identifying labels on her clothing had been meticulously cut off or removed. Even the brand marks on the plastic bottles had been scraped away. The subsequent police investigation uncovered a trail of deliberate deception. At Bergen railway station, 2 suitcases belonging to the woman were found in a left luggage locker. Inside, police found clothing, again with all labels removed. Wigs, several pairs of non-prescription glasses, cosmetics, 500 Deutsche Marks, Norwegian, Belgian, and Swiss currency, and a notepad with coded entries. Code was later deciphered, revealing a list of places she had visited. It turned out the Isdal woman had traveled extensively throughout Norway and Europe, using at least 9 different false identities and passports. Her names included Finella, Lork, Claudia, Tielt, Vera Jarl, Alexia, Zarna, Merces, Genevieve, Lanier, Claudia, Nielsen, and Elisabeth Lanier. She stayed in various hotels, often requesting room changes, and was described by witnesses as elegant, well-dressed, and speaking multiple languages including German, French, Flemish, and English, often with an accent. An autopsy concluded that she died from a combination of burns and carbon monoxide poisoning, along with a lethal dose of sleeping pills. Presence of soot in her airways indicated she was alive when she was burned. However, the manner of death, suicide or murder, remained undetermined. The police leaned towards suicide, but many aspects didn't fit. Why choose such a remote and difficult location? Why burn herself? And why the elaborate efforts to erase her identity? Cold War was at its height, and Norway shared a border with the Soviet Union. The woman's coded messages, multiple identities, and extensive travel led to persistent theories that she might have been a spy. Witnesses reported her meeting unknown men. One dentist recalled her mentioning she was from South Africa and had been traveling. Composite sketches were circulated internationally via Interpol, but no one ever came forward to identify her. Decades later, in 2017, isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she was likely born around 1930, possibly in the Nuremberg area of Germany, and had moved to France or the Franco-German border region as a child. Despite these clues, her true name, her origins, and the reason for her meticulously concealed life and strange death in the Estland Valley remain one of Norway's deepest mysteries. Number 4. The Man in the Iron Mask, a royal secret. For over 3 decades, from roughly 1669 until his death in 1703, a mysterious prisoner was held in various French jails, including the Bastille. His defining characteristic, and the source of endless fascination, was that he was always forced to wear a mask. While popular culture, particularly Alexandre Dumas's novel, The Vicomte de Bragelonne, immortalized it as an iron mask, Contemporary accounts suggest it was more likely made of black velvet. What is certain is that the mask was designed to obscure his features completely, and he was under strict orders never to remove it in front of anyone but his jailer. Prisoner was treated with a degree of respect unusual for ordinary inmates. He was given comfortable lodgings, good food, books, and was even allowed to play the lute. His jailer, Benignan Dauvergne de Saint-Mars, was responsible for him throughout his long imprisonment and moved with him from prison to prison. The identity of this man was a closely guarded state secret, known perhaps only to King Louis XIV and a few of his highest officials. The secrecy surrounding him was absolute. Strict instructions were given that if he ever spoke of anything other than his immediate needs, he was to be killed. Despite these precautions, whispers and rumors circulated. Who could be so important or so dangerous that his identity needed to be hidden from the world for his entire adult life, yet his life itself spared? Theories about his identity began to emerge even during his lifetime and proliferated after his death. One of the most persistent and romantic theories popularized by Voltaire was that he was the older, illegitimate brother of Louis XIV. Another variation suggested he was Louis XIV's identical twin, hidden away to prevent any challenge to the throne. Other candidates proposed over the centuries have included a disgraced general, Eustache Dauger de Cavoye, arrested for involvement in scandalous affairs, an Italian diplomat named Ercole Antonio Mattioli, who betrayed Louis XIV in a political negotiation, and even a son of Oliver Cromwell. Some have suggested he was the true father of Louis XIV, or a foreign nobleman with a dangerous claim. Each theory has its proponents and its evidence, but none has been definitively proven. When the prisoner died in the Bastille in November 1703, he was buried under the name Marchuli. His cell was reportedly scraped clean, and all his belongings were destroyed to erase any trace of his existence or identity. The lengths to which the French crown went to conceal this man's face and story suggest a secret of monumental importance. The man in the iron mask remains one of history's most tantalizing and enduring identity puzzles. Number 3. Jack the Ripper, the unidentified fiend of Whitechapel. In the autumn of 1888, a series of brutal murders in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London's East End terrified the city and captivated the world. Killer, who targeted female sex workers, became known by the chilling name Jack the Ripper. This name originated from a letter purportedly written by the killer himself, which was sent to the Central News Agency and taunted the police. At least 5 murders, known as the Canonical Five, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are widely attributed to Jack the Ripper, though other murders in the area around the same time have also been speculatively linked to him. The nature of the murders was particularly gruesome. The victims' throats were cut and their bodies were subjected to horrific abdominal mutilations. In some cases, organs were removed. Precision of some of the cuts led to speculation that the killer might have had anatomical or surgical knowledge, perhaps being a doctor or a butcher. The attacks occurred in public or semi-public places, often in dark alleyways or courtyards, and the killer managed to commit these acts and escape unseen despite the increasing police presence and public vigilance in Whitechapel. This fueled an atmosphere of fear and panic. Vigilante groups formed, and the press sensationalized the crimes, creating a media frenzy. Despite one of the largest police investigations in British history at the time, involving house-to-house searches, forensic examination of evidence, limited by the era's technology, and interviews with hundreds of people, the identity of Jack the Ripper was never discovered. Numerous letters claiming to be from the killer were received by police and newspapers. The most famous are the Dear Boss letter, which first used the name Jack the Ripper, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter, which was accompanied by a small box containing half of a human kidney, purportedly from one of the victims. The authenticity of these letters is still debated, with many believing some or all were hoaxes. Over the past century, an extraordinary number of suspects have been proposed, ranging from obscure individuals to prominent figures. Søren Klosowski, also known as George Chapman, a Polish serial poisoner, Walter Sickert, a famous artist, and even members of the royal family or high society. Each suspect has a case built around them, often based on circumstantial evidence, modern profiling techniques, or reinterpretations of historical documents. Various attempts have been made using modern DNA analysis on alleged Ripper letters or shawls said to belong to victims, but the results have been controversial and inconclusive due to contamination and provenance issues. To this day, Jack the Ripper remains the archetypal unidentified serial killer, his true name and motives lost in the fog of Victorian London. Number 2. D.B. Cooper, the skyjacker, who vanished into thin air. On November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving in the United States, a man calling himself Dan Cooper, later misreported by the press as D.B. Cooper, a name that stuck, boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727, in Portland, Oregon, bound for Seattle, Washington. He was described as being in his mid-40s, about 6 feet tall, wearing a dark suit, a black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and a dark overcoat. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. Schaffner, assuming it was a business card or a lonely man's phone number, initially put it in her purse, unread. Cooper leaned towards her and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The note stated his demand, $200,000 in negotiable American currency, equivalent to over $1,400,000 today. 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and to fuel the aircraft upon arrival. Schaffner informed the cockpit. The pilot, William Scott, contacted Seattle-Tacoma Air Traffic Control, who in turn notified local and federal authorities. The airline president, Donald Nyrup, authorized payment of the ransom. Cooper remained calm and polite throughout the ordeal, even ordering a bourbon and soda and paying for it. Passengers were unaware of the hijacking. They were told the landing in Seattle was delayed due to a minor mechanical issue. Upon landing in Seattle, the ransom money, 20,000 $20 bills, most with serial numbers beginning with L, indicating issuance by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and the parachutes were delivered to the plane. Cooper then released all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants. He kept Captain Scott, First Officer William Ratachek, Flight Engineer H.E. Anderson, and Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow on board. Cooper instructed the pilots to fly to Mexico City, maintaining a specific altitude, 10,000 feet, airspeed, under 200 knots, and wing flap setting, 15 degrees, with the landing gear down. These conditions were slow and low enough for a parachute jump. He also demanded that the aft air stair of the Boeing 727A built-in staircase at the rear of the plane be lowered in flight. The flight crew initially objected, stating it was unsafe, but Cooper insisted. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, Nevada, in a dark, rainy, and turbulent night sky, around 8:13 p.m. PST, Cooper, wearing one of the parachutes and with the ransom money likely tied to him, jumped from the lowered aft air stair into the rugged, heavily forested wilderness of southwestern Washington state. An extensive manhunt was launched, one of the longest and most exhaustive in U.S. history. Despite combing the suspected jump zone, no trace of Cooper, his parachute, or the money was found at the time. The FBI investigated thousands of suspects, but never positively identified D.B. Cooper. In February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram vacationing with his family, found 3 decaying bundles of $20 bills, totaling $5,800 on the sandy banks of the Columbia River near Toyna Bar, Washington, about 20 miles southwest of the northernmost projected flight path. The serial numbers matched those of the ransom money. This discovery deepened the mystery. How did the money get there so far from the main search areas, and what happened to the rest of it, and to Cooper himself? Did he survive the perilous jump into a freezing, stormy night and a treacherous wilderness? Or did he perish, his remains and the rest of the money lost forever? The FBI officially closed the active investigation in 2016, but the case remains open, and D.B. Cooper's identity and fate are one of America's most captivating unsolved mysteries. Number 1. The Somerton Man, Tiananmen Square Case, a cryptic end on an Australian beach. On the morning of December 1, 1948, at Somerton Park Beach, south of Adelaide, South Australia, the body of a well-dressed man was discovered lying in the sand, propped up against a seawall. He was of athletic build, estimated to be in his early 40s, about 5 feet 11 inches tall, with fair to ginger hair. He wore a white shirt, a red, white, and blue tie, brown trousers, socks, and smart brown shoes that were notably clean, as if he hadn't walked far. He had no hat, unusual for the time, and no wallet or identification. All labels from his clothing had been carefully removed. A half-smoked cigarette rested on his collar, as if it had fallen from his mouth. His pockets contained an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a bus ticket from the city, a narrow aluminum American comb, a half-empty packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette packet containing 7 cigarettes of a different, more expensive brand, Kensitas, and a quarter-full box of Bryant and May matches. An autopsy conducted by Dr. John Dwyer found congestion in his brain and stomach and an enlarged spleen. Dr. Dwyer concluded that death was unnatural and likely due to poison, but no specific poison could be identified. He suspected a fast-acting barbiturate or hypnotic administered orally that would be difficult to detect. There were no signs of violence. One particularly strange detail was the man's well-developed calf muscles, described as being like those of a ballet dancer or a long-distance runner. His pointed shoes also seemed to fit this observation. The mystery deepened on January 14, 1949, when Professor John Cleland, the pathologist re-examining the case, found a tiny rolled-up piece of paper concealed deep within a fob pocket sewn into the man's trousers. Paper contained 2 words, printed in an ornate typeface, Tiananmen Square. This phrase, meaning "it is ended" or "finished," was identified as being from the last page of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of 12th century Persian poems. Police launched a public appeal to find the specific copy of the book from which this scrap had been torn. Months later, in July 1949, a man came forward. He revealed that shortly after the Somerton man's death, he had found a very rare first-edition copy of Edward Fitzgerald's translation of the Rubaiyat in the back seat of his unlocked car, which he had parked near Somerton Beach around the time of the man's death. He hadn't thought much of it until he saw the renewed police appeal. The last page of this book, containing Tiananmen Square, had indeed been torn out. In the back of this book, written faintly in pencil, were 5 lines of capital letters appearing to be a code, WRGOABABD. This code has never been deciphered. Also found in the back of the book was a telephone number. This number belonged to a nurse named Jessica Ellen Jo Thompson, then known by her married name, who lived in Glenelg, a suburb near Somerton Beach. When questioned, Thompson denied knowing the deceased man or why he would have her phone number. She did, however, react strangely when shown a plaster cast bust that had been made of the Somerton man's head and shoulders, appearing quite distressed or even faint, though she still denied recognizing him. She also mentioned that around late 1948, an unknown man had tried to visit her or had asked a neighbor about her. She owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but said she had given it to an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall during World War II. This initially led police to believe the Somerton man was Boxall, but Boxall was soon found alive with his copy of the Rubaiyat, a different edition, intact, complete with the Tamam Shud page. In 2022, Professor Derek Abbott, who had long researched the case, announced that through extensive DNA and genealogical research using hairs found trapped in the plaster bust, he had identified the Somerton man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in Melbourne in 1905. Webb had a sister married to a man named Thomas Keane, hence a teak name, found on a tie the Somerton man wore was a potential link. Webb had reportedly separated from his wife in 1947, and his whereabouts after that were unknown to his family. South Australian police have acknowledged Abbott's findings, but as of late, 2023, have not officially confirmed the identification, pending their own further investigation. If this identification is correct, it answers the who, but not the why. Why did Carl Webb end up on Somerton Beach? Why the elaborate secrecy, the removed labels, the untraceable poison, and the cryptic code? Was it espionage, a failed love affair, or something else entirely? The full story of the man who became known as the Somerton Man, even if his name is finally known, still holds many secrets.